Welcome to the Friendliness of the Heart retreat, Sesshin, Corvallis, Sangha Jewel, which is a real jewel to be here and get to share this beautiful community. So many hands and hearts creating this gem. It's July 13th, 2024. And I'd like to continue a theme that Bansho began, this theme of friendliness of the heart, of loving kindness, of metta, as hospitality. So in this talk, I'd like to also expand a little bit into the other three of the four immeasurables, of which metta, loving kindness, goodwill is one of the four. The other three are compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. I've heard a great metaphor of these four immeasurables that they're like a rowboat. And metta, loving kindness, is the prow of the boat. It's what moves, we're moving forward, and that's where we're pointing. Then you have sympathetic joy and compassion as the oars on either side. And they're in a way a form of metta, in that it's this wish for well-being, this wish for goodwill. But compassion is a wish for well-being in response to suffering. And sympathetic joy is a wish for well-being in response to someone's good fortune. And so if we're uneven in those things, we just end up going in circles. And finally, equanimity is the rudder, and it keeps us steady in turbulent waters. So I'll expand on those immeasurables a little bit and see what this has to do with awareness, what this has to do with realization, and aligning with reality. Sound good? Okay. Thank you all Zoom people for being here too. It's nice to see you all as well. So friendliness of the heart, metta, in a way we might characterize this as welcoming visitors. Bansho read the Rumi poem, which everybody's probably familiar with, called The Guest House, a little snippet of it, that this being human is a guest house, every morning a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Welcome and entertain them all. And treat each guest honorably. Invite them in. I'm going to pause for the guest of the fan that is being wrangled with a remote control and some beeping. This is our life right now. Thank you. How do we welcome whatever comes? So Rumi is, of course, we can talk about this as in hospitality, as in socially, which is worth talking about. It's worth practicing and makes a difference when we're literally being hospitable to other people, other beings. But this poem and what we're really also talking about is this hospitality, this welcoming in the larger sense of our life. And really, how could we ever be a good host to anybody else if we're not a good host to our own experience? If we can't even inhabit our own skin, then how are we going to actually relate to anyone else? So as Bancho said, a good host is interested in their guests. They're just interested. They show interest. They're curious. A good host can also meet you in a very personal way and remember your story, right? But he also mentioned that a good host also moves on eventually. They don't just hang out with you at the whole party. They mingle with other guests, and they give you a little freedom to explore things and meet other people, maybe to do your own thing. In this way, a good host can also be kind of impersonal or even-handed or impartial and sees the big picture. You're just a part of the party. A good host is not trying to change you or fix you, are they? They're not campaigning for you to be different somehow. Maybe you've been a guest in a house where they're working an agenda for you, trying to change you. And what's that like? That's not a very fun party. And so we often attend that party ourselves. We are that host for our own life, demanding everything be otherwise and making things pretty uncomfortable in the process. So this is what suffering is. It's grasping an aversion. I don't want that. I want this other thing. And it's a failure to really align with the reality of impermanence, failure to align with the reality of that we aren't who we think we are. We aren't who we're trying to be. We can't be. So that is the root of suffering. But a good host isn't pushing away. A good host isn't dwelling. A good host is just letting it flow through, just allowing our life to flow as it is, and maybe move the rudder a little bit here and there. Interestingly, in the sutras, the Buddha was often described as very hospitable, as welcoming, as friendly, as polite and genial, which is lovely to imagine Shakyamuni Buddha in that way, that he was a friendly guy. He was genial towards everyone who came to see him. And he encouraged this in his followers. So I started seeing the four immeasurables as kind of like a team of party hosts. And that's a fun party, I think, to go to. So the four immeasurables are sometimes also called the Brahma Viharas, or the divine abodes, because it would be pretty divine to live there, to live in one of them. Loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, equanimity. Metta, often translated into different words. Loving kindness has a pretty, almost cloying kind of a feeling for me. I don't love the word loving kindness because it's so like huggy and kind of claustrophobic in a way. Like, oh, I'm just gotta be some kind of loving, kind way. There's a pressure almost in that word. I mean, it's a fine word, but it can kind of have all that in it somehow. I see some nodding too, that there's some other folks that are just like, maybe not that word, maybe not that translation. I actually prefer the word goodwill, although I also love the store, but the attitude is more what I'm talking about. goodwill is really what this is. Like, I wish you well. I wish you to have what you need. I want all good things for you. It's that kind of heartfelt wish. And there's a great story about one of the Thai forest monks, and they live in a little hut in the jungle. And there's a story about one of them, as told by one of his students, that his teacher goes into his little hut and there's a giant, some tropical snake or something that's, of course, totally venomous, and it goes behind a little piece of furniture and stays there. And he's like, ugh, what are we going to do here? And this goes on. He goes out of his hut, he comes back in, and every time the snake goes back deeper into the hut. And so apparently this teacher sat down and started practicing and focusing his mind on this snake, and basically saying, maybe he even did it out loud, just offering this wish for goodwill to the snake. If you stay here, there's probably going to be a misunderstanding between us. And so it would probably be, I'm sure you would be much better off, out there. And of course, in one of these miraculous, Dharma teacher stories, of course, the snake eventually, fairly immediately leaves. But that we can wish goodwill for somebody over there. Like, that's okay to wish for. We don't have to be all, come stay at my house, forever kind of a thing. Goodwill. And friendliness, wishing the best for someone. So that is kind of our base here is metta. And then adding this different flavor, maybe compassion, and I'll talk more about compassion in a minute, but that is this same wish, but it's in response to suffering. When we encounter suffering in someone else or in ourselves, compassion naturally arises. And sympathetic joy arises in response to someone's well-being. And this one is interesting to practice with, and I encourage you to look for it, because it's not often quite obvious. When we're happy for other people's good fortune, it's kind of rare, actually. I was noticing that, or thinking about that, and when have I noticed that recently? And in some of our groups, we've been talking about wholesome and unwholesome desire, and that part of, for me, goodwill, wishing well for people, is wanting them to do things that are good for them, whether they maybe don't want to, and that's okay, but I would wish for them to want to do things that aren't harmful to themselves or others. And so when I do see that, when I see people engaged in that kind of wholesome activity, that can be really joyful. Like on the 4th of July, some of the monastics had these gigantic bubble making string things, and they were making these huge bubbles just out in the parking lot long after the party was over. Totally wholesome and joyful and sweet. I had that sympathetic joy when I was noticing Daigyo tending the altar this weekend. Totally wholesome activity. I'm doing the walking meditation. I see this candle that's fresh and beaming out for all of our benefit. Totally, totally joyful, precious. So stuff like that, we have to turn our mind to these things. I think a lot of times we are going in circles because our compassion muscle is maybe not, you can't overdevelop it. Maybe the sympathetic joy is a little underdeveloped. So these first three of the immeasurables are pretty warm, aren't they? They're relational and kind of personal. But the fourth one, equanimity, I would say is a little more cool, maybe, but no less loving. I think it's a different kind of love. It's a kind of love that offers you freedom, even if it's to do stuff that is not good for you, like that kind of freedom. In equanimity, there's that impartiality, there's a non-judgmental stance, which is also quite refreshing to be in relationship to someone who is not judgmental. Isn't that right? That is such to get to be in a relationship with someone who has a pretty large view and doesn't have an agenda for you. Bancho spoke about unconditional love, and that's kind of what this is. Can be very large, can be spacious, can be cool, like space, like the ocean. Like the ocean supports so much life, and yet, is also governed by the laws of physics, or what we call, little d dharma. If you're a warm-blooded human being out there in the ocean for any length of time, that's going to be it for you. And the ocean's just kind of like, okay, right? That's equanimity. It's just the truth. It's just how things are. So Bancho and I didn't plan this, but there's another poem on hospitality. And it's called On Hospitality, a Reply to Rumi. Have any of you heard this poem? Oh, good. So this poem has a little more of an equanimity kind of a flavor, and it's by Amy Issacoff Newell. Welcome all the visitors, you say. Do not put bars on the windows or locks on the doors. Do not close up the chimney flue. Duct tape and plastic sheeting will not keep the visitors at bay. They'll pound on the doors. They'll break your windows. They'll breach the barricades. They'll storm the beach, swarm in like ants through cracks. They'll leak like water through the walls and creep like mice and curl like smoke and crack like ice against the window glass. Keep them out? It can't be done. Don't try. Welcome all the visitors? Fine. There's all kinds of welcoming, however. I do not have to throw a house party. I will not post flyers. There will be no open bar. No one will get drunk and lock themselves in the bathroom. No one will break furniture, grind chips into the rug, throw anyone else in the pool, or lose an earring in the couch. I do not have to run a guest house either. There will be no crackling fire and no easy chairs. I will not serve tea to the visitors. I will not dispense ginger snaps and ask my guests about themselves. Did my mother send you? Why must you plague me? Why not stay a little while longer? Who are you really? If I must welcome, and I'm convinced I must, let me build a great hall to receive my guests, like a Greek temple. Let it be open on all sides. Let it be wide and bright and empty. Let it have a marble floor, beautiful and cold and hard. Let there be no sofas, no benches, no dark corners, no anterooms, and no coat closets, no walls, not even a ledge to lean against. I'll welcome anyone who comes. I'll show them my enormous empty hall. Come in, I'll say. I'll even smile, perhaps make conversation for a while. And if someone settles on the floor as if to stay, or circles round and round as if they've lost their way, I'll be kind, extend my hand, and gently show them out again. This is another way of welcoming. It is letting things flow through. As a person who's had a many decade career in the field of social work. I've had some real swan dives with burnout. I know all about that intimately. And one thing that I had to learn the hard way was that when I thought that I was some kind of a vessel for pain, that I had to carry it, that that was not sustainable. So I now see myself as more of a screen door. Things flow through. And that is a sustainable compassion that is truly immeasurable. This wish for well-being in response to suffering that is alive and continually able to be replenished, able to flow. It is of real benefit to offer metta systematically as a practice in response to suffering, that of others, that of ourselves, especially when there's nothing else we can do. And we can do that when there's nothing else that we know to do until we figure out what else we can do. And it can help clarify that question for us. But we can easily get stuck thinking, oh, I'm just wasting my time on the cushion. Shouldn't I be out there changing the world and really actually helping people? How dare I have the privilege to just sit here? And I think that is ununderstandable and maybe a good question. It's to me, it's a response to the pain of a feeling, maybe a situation in which we feel helpless, where we want to change and maybe feel powerless to change our outer world. And I would say that metta is not a practice that is at odds with actions that we might take on behalf of others. It's not something we have to do instead of. It's certainly something we would do in addition to, and can allow us to bring ourselves forward in a way that is not going to cause more harm, because we're clearer in mind and heart. And we need that right now so desperately. It might be very easy to underestimate that and think we need to react to everything, when in fact, what we need are people who can feel their breath, who can touch the earth, who know that we're so much bigger than who we think we are. It may be hard to figure out what your life circumstances are calling you to do. It's hard to not react to the 1,000 things that are coming at us all the time. But I find too that when I have decided to focus on just one thing in the overwhelming panoply of everything that's on fire right now, that's been really helpful. Like, for some reason, I have a lot of energy for the ocean and ocean cleanup and plastic in the ocean. For some reason, I can read that stuff and look at it and not want to just like bury myself forever. And polar bears, no, cannot. I'm not reading about them, because I'm like, what am I going to do? I can't help polar bear. Like, what? But plastic, I find that extremely interesting. I can totally just geek out on that and go to the coast and pick up plastic and trash wherever I happen to be. It feels really good, actually. If you've ever done any of that trash cleanup, there's something about the hunter-gatherer, like something in our brain that's like, oh, this feels really good. We do the beach cleanup, which you're all invited to this year, by the way. It's at Beverly Beach in the fall. Please come. It's a great retreat. And Bancho every year is always like, what if there's not enough trash for everybody? He really does. So, another thing that can happen when we're just hell-bent on embodying compassion in the world is that we get ourselves stuck in what's been called helper's prison. And that is when I see myself as the helper. I'm the helper. Well, guess what that makes you? Somebody who needs help. And that is not even footing, really, now, is it? That is easy to get stuck, and then in that original idea, and if we continue to insist on that idea, we can add a bunch of layers to our story about me, our story about you, fail to see the immensity and complexity and the places of connection that are what's really true about anybody we might encounter. And we might lose our curiosity about our life, someone else's life. So how do we get out of helper's prison? I mean, I would just say stop. Stop. And we can become the source of compassion, like the chant of boundless compassion says. This Buddha, the source of compassion. This Buddha receives only compassion. We can be the source of compassion by generating this undying wish for the well-being of ourselves and others. That is this continuous fountain of compassion that we can tend with our practice. And this Buddha receives only compassion points to the transformative capacity that we have, especially when we practice even painful things. I mean, you probably have something painful in your life story that you turned into something valuable, something beautiful. Just one thing that comes to my mind for me, being an quote unquote, air quotes, oversensitive child in my family of origin. Here's this tearful little sensitive being in a family that really appreciated more like coarse humor and rugged individualism, and it was a difficult fit, but it enabled me to eventually come to learn about the richness in the emotional realm and to learn that language so well that I now share it as a therapist and offer that to others. We all can take whatever our challenges are and transform them into wisdom when we're good and ready. That's not for someone else to tell you to do. But if you ever do decide that it's time, that is an option. That is an option. Even your most excruciating experiences in meditation can eventually help others if you let it. They say that the best meditation teachers aren't the ones that had an easy time. Because of course, like if it's like falling off a log for you, how would you teach someone? Oh, you just sit down and, it's great. That may not be most people's experience. Even if we do find some relief of suffering, why keep going then? I mean, probably what brings you to Dharma practice, I like to say it's not usually because everything's going so awesome. It's usually suffering. this question of suffering that brings us to practice. Well, we might get a little bit of relief then. Why keep going? So we have the Bodhisattva vow, the vow to awaken for the sake of all sentient beings, on behalf of others. And that is what can keep us going. That is what makes our practice so much larger. That is what helps us reorient to the truth of who we actually are, who we really are. So an example of this happened in December during our Rohatsu Sesshin, not last year, but year before. And the tradition in Zen is for people to stay up an extra hour late in meditation into the night until the last night. You stay up all night and don't sleep at all. And, I would stay up a little bit, but I had never done the actual stay up all night part. And that year, Bancho's mother was dying, and she was in Illinois, and he had gone to be with her, and I had a sense that it was really close, and but it wasn't time for me to go yet, and so I was still there, and he was in Illinois. I was still in the retreat, and I decided I would stay up all night and do loving kindness practice for her, specifically for her, all night. And that is exactly what I did. And it was so easy. It was so easy. It's so much better to do this for and with others. So there's a line in another one of our chants. Mastered or not, reality constantly flows. So whether you feel like you've kind of got this or not, it sort of doesn't matter. Mastered or not, reality constantly flows. I mean, that's really a hilarious line. It's kind of reassuring. The reality bus is leaving on time, whether you're on it or not. And even then, you can't miss. You can't fall out of reality. We can be very confused. But reality has a way of always just being right here for us at every moment. Right now, here it is. We can just return. Whatever we impose on it in our mind, we don't have to listen to that. We can just be present with our senses. We don't have to live in our story. Mastered or not, reality constantly flows. And to me, that also says we already are inseparable from nature and the flow of reality. So to me, the proof of this is that we are in fact bodhisattvas already. Like, this is what we really are. The proof of that to me is in all those stories, and you've all heard them, of people who risk their lives in order to save a total stranger from some dangerous situation, like diving into a frozen lake or running into a burning building. These just, sometimes they're teenagers that, save a baby or something like that. Pull somebody onto the tracks of the subway after they've fallen, and the subway rolls right over them. I mean, these things happen. And you know what the people always say when they're interviewed by the news? I'm not a hero. I did what anybody would do. I just wasn't even thinking about it. That's what they all say, isn't it? This is who we really are when we're not thinking. This is why we call it realization and not attainment. That's another part of a chant that totally blew my mind when I heard it, that there's nothing to attain. Are you kidding me? I mean, you can chew on that for a lifetime. So far, so good. Nothing to attain. We're just realizing what's already been waiting around for us to see it. Awakening. What is awake? What is it? What is awake? There's a practice I like to do. Ellen Langer, she's sometimes called the mother of mindfulness. She's a researcher. And she says that seeing things new is the definition of mindfulness. So the practice is just close your eyes for a moment and try to imagine the room as you remember it. Get every detail in there, or whatever your view is. See if you can remember what's in the room, colors, the objects. And when you've got it nice and detailed, go ahead and open your eyes and see what you missed. I mean, our version of reality is paltry compared to this alive, living moment. So what is it that's awake? What is it that digests our food? What is it that sees? What is it that hears? What is it that feels? So here's this miracle of awareness, this miracle of attention. We don't even know what it is. Is it even ours? I mean, social media companies and advertising agencies are kind of getting a handle on what it is of our attention. Our attention, our awareness gets hijacked, doesn't it? It's being monetized. There's something really valuable in it. Advertisers rate the success of an ad campaign by how many eyeballs they get. What a gift you've given yourself to be here, to settle the mind and heart, to rest the eyes. Please don't forget that this is available to you. Thank you to everyone who keeps it going. It's a refuge. So speaking of eyeballs, I'd like to end with a koan about compassion. And koans are stories in the Zen tradition that are kind of archetypal. It's almost best if you don't understand it altogether. That's kind of how they're designed. They're not designed to give you the answer. They're not a riddle. They're not, something that has a trick in it. But they're designed to be kind of carried around as a question. Like, what does this mean? What does this mean? What about that word? What about that part? What do they mean by that? And to live with it and apply it in your actual life, carried around for a while. So I don't expect you to necessarily pick up this koan in this way, although if you do, it's very powerful human technology, frankly. So this is from the Blue Cliff Record, case 89. And I'll just read the exchange between these two. They became teachers, but I think they were students at the time, or sometimes they were brothers, spoken of as brothers, Yunyan and Daowu. Yunyan asked Daowu, "How does the Bodhisattva of great compassion use so many hands and eyes?" Daowu said, "It's just like a person in the middle of the night reaching in search of a pillow." Yunyan said, "I understand." Daowu said, "How do you understand it?" Yunyan said, "All over the body are hands and eyes." Daowu said, "What you said is all right, but it's only 80% of it." Yunyan said, "I'm like this, elder brother. How do you understand it?" Daowu said, "Throughout the body are hands and eyes." So these two guys, there's a few stories about them kind of picking on each other. We call it Dharma combat sometimes, where you can challenge each other a little bit, affectionately challenge each other's understanding and thereby get a little clearer capacity. So I want to unpack a few features of this, but not get too deep into it. I just want to leave you with this mystery about compassion. So this is about the Bodhisattva of great compassion, sometimes called Kenon or Kuan Yin, or in our meal chant, Avalokiteshvara. So this is a being who vowed never to rest until she had freed all sentient beings from the cycle of suffering. And there was at one point she had actually come really close to doing it. She had cleared out all the hell realms, all the suffering beings. Hell was empty, quiet, no more screaming. Like, she did it. And then it started filling up again. And after struggling to meet the needs of so many beings on all the, not just the hell realms, the hungry ghost realms, all the animal realms, all of it, the human realm, her head exploded. I mean, don't we know what that feels like, right? Good Lord. So her head explodes, but then Amida Buddha says, "Okay, I'll give you 11 heads, and that way you can see in all directions and hear all the cries of the world, and maybe this will, help you help others." So she goes at it again, and she's trying desperately to help all the beings with her 2 arms, and it's too much, and so then her arms explode. And Amida Buddha says, "Okay, here you go, 1,000 arms, 1,000 arms." So you may have seen sometimes the depiction of Avalokiteshvara and her 1,000 arms. Each one often has a implement that's there to do something to help others, but also there's often an eye on the palms. And when we think about the sensitivity of our hands and the delicateness of our vision, it's this beautiful, how many points of view does she have, right? It's not just a personal, singular point of view that she has to help, to be of service. So this is the question. How does the Bodhisattva of great compassion use so many hands and eyes? Daowu said, "It's just like a person in the middle of the night reaching in search of a pillow." What? What? Bancho spoke to this in his talk at some point. When you're half asleep and you don't even really know what you're doing, it's not even voluntary. Maybe it's 3 a.m. and you're feeding a baby. That's involuntary. That's compassion, alleviating suffering as just the only thing you could do without thinking. And when our hand reaches out to find the pillow, we're not doing that. It just happens naturally. Or like the jolt of a search for a towel when somebody spills something simple like that. Or the regular people who dive into a freezing lake to save someone. Yunyan said, all over the body are hands and eyes. All over the body, every pore on the skin, all our senses, our outward-facing senses, taking in the world. But then Dao says, well, that's right, but that's only 80% of it. How could that be? Not quite right. All over the body, hands and eyes, right? But Dao says, throughout the body are hands and eyes. Throughout the body, completely infused, inside and out. Life flows through the body, and the body is not separate from life. It's just this wholeness. It's more than just what we see on the surface. It's the seen and the unseen. When what we see, what we know of our body is far beyond our skin. Our life is larger than we think it is. And when we reach for a pillow to comfort the body, we are aligned and in the flow with what flows through this body. We're not separate from the miracle of nature, the miracle of life unfolding. Every cell in our being is participating, constantly flowing in this universal dance. Whether our story about who and what we are is that big or not, reality constantly flows. And it is helpful to practice. At least I have found that to be true. So let's keep practicing together. Let's keep going and realize who we are together. Thank you.